December 1950. Jet fighters roar across the skies above Korea. For half a century, dogfights have been won or lost with propeller planes driven by piston engines. Now, for the first time in history, swept-wing fighters with jet engines slug it out at extreme altitudes and near supersonic speeds. American F-86 Sabers head-to-head against the communist MiGs. Their contrails will write a new chapter in the annals of air warfare, in a place called MiG Alley. Experience the battle, dissect the tactics, relive the dogfights. August 5th, 1952. 4 U.S. Air Force F-86 Sabers move into the hostile skies of MiG Alley above northwest Korea. For over 2 years, nimble Russian-built MiG-15 fighters have been darting from sanctuaries in China, challenging American bombers and fighters. The Saber flight is led by Captain Robinson Risner. His mission is to find the MiGs and kill them. All eyes are outside the cockpit, scanning, searching for a contrail, a telltale flash of metal. Suddenly, there they are. 8 silver MiGs passing left to right, 1,000 feet below. Perfect setup. Too perfect.
I can still remember seeing those MiGs below me. That was unusual. Anytime you saw MiGs below you, it was an exciting thing, but we learned quickly to suspect the situation.
Risner instinctively calls check 6. His wingman responds. Lead, we've got MiGs at 3 o'clock. 6 MiGs scream in from overhead, lethal cannon flashing. The Sabers are in a trap. Now they are the prey. Risner calls a right brake. The Sabers stand on one wing, pull hard around. Neck muscles strain to keep heads upright against the heavy pull of G. The Sabers turn into the face of the enemy. Risner is screaming headlong into his first life and death encounter in MiG Alley. 2 years earlier, on June 25, 1950, the North Korean People's Army swarmed across the 38th parallel, the dividing line between the Communist North and the Republic of South Korea. U.S. armed forces, under United Nations auspices, are committed to the fight. The North Koreans have the manpower and tanks, but their primitive air force is quickly shot to ribbons. American aircraft are free to roam the skies. Communist troop concentrations and supply lines are relentlessly pounded from the air.
It had a great effect because we were able in a lot of circumstances to either curtail or certainly decrease the amount of enemy army activity.
But then, in November 1950, the Americans are stunned by the appearance of new Soviet-built MiG-15 jet fighters. With a top speed of 670 miles per hour, the MiG is 100 miles per hour faster than older F-80 and F-84 jets in Korea. The critical air supremacy achieved early in the war is now in jeopardy.
The MiG was built as a point interceptor. It was light, it had a lighter wing loading, it didn't carry as much fuel, which limited the range, but made it very good for climbing purposes and turning purposes.
It was optimized to shoot down B-29s. That's why it had the heavy cannon armament that it did, 223 millimeters and a 37 millimeter. The
cannon was really a surprising weapon. If the guy was within about 700 or 800 feet behind you and he fired it, you could feel the vibration in your rudder pedals. When that happened to you, you knew you better do something pretty quick, left or right, but don't stay where you are.
The MiG-15s dash from bases in China, just across the North Korean border. Any aircraft venturing into a 6,000 square mile slice of airspace above Northwest Korea is vulnerable. American airmen call it MiG Alley. It is here that the fiercest air battles of the Korean War will be etched across the cold blue sky. The U.S. Air Force rushes the 4th Fighter Interceptor Wing to Korea. The 4th is equipped with the new F-86A Saber jet. It is the only airplane in the Western arsenal that approaches the MiG's capabilities.
The F-86 was my very favorite plane that I've ever flown, which I used to kiddingly call my little sports car.
The F-86 was a pure fighter. It was not intended to intercept or shoot down enemy bombers, but it was meant to take on enemy fighters, destroy them, and achieve air superiority.
The Saber is a strong, maneuverable, and stable gun platform. The very qualities needed in a good fighter aircraft. Although the Saber is slightly faster in the crucial areas of rate of climb and altitude, the MiG is superior.
That's assuming that you got the same pilots operating both of them. One of the main things that we enjoyed over the communist aircraft was that our pilots were better trained and we had better tactics eventually.
F-86s launched their first combat air patrols into MiG Alley in December 1950. Captain Bruce Hinton takes first blood for the Saber on December 17th. The F-86s do well. But there are 400 MiGs based across the Yalu. In 1950, there are fewer than 50 Sabers in Korea. Even though outnumbered, the experience and esprit of the Saber pilots makes the critical difference in MiG Alley. It's called flight suit attitude. Robbie Risner has it. Arriving in Korea in the spring of 1952, Risner's flying skills are quickly recognized. He soon advances to flight lead status. Today, in MiG Alley, Risner's Saber flight has just been jumped by 8 MiG-15s.
They normally had high escort. My wingman called out. We had more MiGs coming in on our 3 o'clock position, making a pass on us.
The MiGs are higher and have the speed advantage. If the Sabers continue straight and level, they present broadside targets to the MiGs. If they turn left, the MiGs will attack from the rear. Risner's only option is to turn directly into the attackers, presenting a smaller cross-section while forcing the MiGs to overshoot. Risner calls a hard break into the MiGs.
Being a typical fighter pilot, flying that wonderful F-86, we weren't really concerned about these guys. We didn't want them to hit us, though. So we broke into them, made a high G turn into them.
The abrupt maneuver derails the ambush. 2 MiGs overshoot and streak by. The F-86s reverse. As the MiGs dive at the Americans, the Sabers make a hard climbing turn directly into them. The MiGs overshoot. The Sabers then reverse their direction, putting them on their attackers' 6 o'clock. The tables have turned within seconds, the hallmark of jet-age combat in MiG Alley.
I took tail end Charlie because he's the closest one to me. And I put the pepper on the tailpipe, pulled the triggers, he lit up like a Christmas tree. You see, we had armor-piercing incendiary bullets in those 650 caliber machine guns.
The burst riddles the bandit's engine. The MiG pulls into a climbing turn in a desperate attempt to shake his tormentor. Trailing smoke, the MiG claws for altitude. The smoke suddenly stops. His engine quits. The MiG coasts upward, bleeding off airspeed. Risner's F-86 shudders as he chops power and pops his speed brakes to stay in trail. The MiG hangs suspended, motionless, then drops off into a spin. The F-86 buffets as it too loses energy and enters a stall. Risner kicks in left rudder, noses over, fires another burst into the spiraling MiG, only 300 feet away.
It was a thrill to hear those guns chattering, because something was going to happen up in front, and sure enough it did.
50 caliber armor-piercing incendiary rounds slam into the MiG's aft fuselage. The vertical stabilizer is blown clear away. The MiG pilot ejects. The fight is over. It is Risner's first kill.
I'll tell you, that was a grand feeling. We were doing what we were assigned to do, and that was to knock every MiG down we could. And that's what I did.
But this fight is just a prelude. 4 months later, Risner will lock horns with the best pilot he's ever seen in one of the most heart-stopping encounters of MiG Alley. September 15, 1952. Captain Robbie Risner is leading a flight of 4 F-86s into MiG Alley. It's 4 months since his first kill. In the effort to maintain air supremacy in the MiG-infested area, the Sabers are escorting F-84 fighter bombers to an industrial area near the mouth of the Yalu River. The mission profile puts Risner's flight into a protective orbit over what is normally prohibited Chinese airspace, and directly above the largest concentration of MiG airfields in Manchuria. Midway into their protective sweep, the Sabers run into 4 MiGs. The MiGs bank away as if retreating from the area. But Risner suspects a trick. He continues tracking the enemy fighters. Sure enough, the MiGs turn back. They're heading for the bombers. The MiGs are initiating one of the Korean War's most remarkable encounters. Although at maximum range, the Saber's radar-ranging gun sight finds the target with deadly efficiency.
One of the technological advantages that the F-86 had over the MiG, as opposed to aerodynamic features, was that the 86 had a radar-ranging gun sight, and that meant that Saber pilot could get a fast, accurate tracking solution on a maneuvering enemy target, and it would automatically compensate for the ballistic drop of those 50 caliber rounds. And when it was working properly, it was deadly accurate because the first round would likely impact on target.
Risner's machine guns shatter the MiG's canopy. The other 3 MiGs run away. Risner, covered by his wingman, counters the MiG's turn. Fires another burst. The MiG initiates violent evasive action in an attempt to get Risner off his tail. He noses over into a dive, rolls inverted, then rolls again. The MiG pilot demonstrates superb mastery of his machine. He will put Risner's flying skills to the ultimate test. This is a special breed of aviator. When MiGs first encountered Sabers in 1950, they usually made diving attacks from higher altitudes. They rarely maneuvered or turned into the F-86s to fire another burst. This was largely due to the inexperience of the communist pilots, as well as the MiG's limited range. But there was another reason. Moscow and Peking needed to hide the identities of their airmen. The Soviets were using MiG Alley as a clandestine training arena. Russian pilots couldn't fly within 60 miles of UN lines or over the Yellow Sea for fear of being picked up and their true identities revealed. The Russians even strafed one of their own pilots who had parachuted into the ocean. In the summer of 1951, the Soviets changed their tactics, replacing trainees with instructors and high-time fighter pilots, veterans of the Great Patriotic War. The Americans call them Honchos, Japanese slang for big shot. And they are good. Today, Risner is tangling with a Honcho he will never forget.
The MiG was so aggressive. He also was so well trained, he did not intend for me to get right behind him and shoot him down. So what he did was, he turned that thing upside down and split S. That means he reversed his direction.
The split S is a commonly used fighter reversal technique. The aircraft rolls inverted and dives, pulling out in the opposite direction.
He was so low, and I was sure he wasn't going to make it, and I said to my wingman, this is going to be the easiest kill I ever had. Well, it turned out this guy made it.
There should have been a fireball, but the MiG recovers miraculously into a dry riverbed. Risner watches in disbelief as the MiG twists and turns right on the deck.
He was so close to the ground, he kicked rocks and debris up. I, meanwhile, had managed to get in behind him. I got dents all over my airplane where he knocked rocks, blew rocks up off of the riverbed. Well, from there on, it was a real fight. This guy was some pilot.
Risner can barely keep the stick in his hands as he's thumped hard by the MiG's jet wash. The MiG flies like a banshee. He chops power, pops out his speed brakes. The MiG is trying to force the Saber to overshoot, which will expose Risner to the MiG's cannon. Risner counters by rolling his jet over the MiG, bleeding off airspeed while keeping on his adversary's 6 o'clock. Then, the MiG firewalls the throttle and accelerates away in a hard turn, pulling maximum G.
He took me on a mad race, and I'd get in a shot at him every once in a while. We were tenacious as a bulldog. We just didn't want to turn him loose.
The MiG reverses his turn. Another burst from Risner. Parts of the tail fly off. The fuselage begins to smoke. Risner can't believe his eyes. The MiG goes inverted, pushes vertically up the side of a mountain and over the top.
When that happens, you're putting negative G's on your body. Your eyeballs pop out about this far. The blood rushes to your head, you can get a red out. I wouldn't even attempt it. I have to do a half roll and pull down.
Down again in the riverbed. The MiG chops power. Risner reacts instinctively to slow with the MiG.
I coasted right up beside him, wingtip to wingtip. I looked into his cockpit. He looked into my cockpit. He raised his fist and shook it at me, and I thought, man, this is like the movies.
But it's not a movie. The MiG suddenly banks to the right. Risner is snapped back to the moment. Black puffs of anti-aircraft fire fill the sky. The Honcho has led them directly over a Chinese airbase. September 15, 1952, a desperate but enormously skilled MiG pilot has led Robbie Risner and his wingman on a wild, twisting chase all the way to his home base, Tak Tung Kao, 35 miles inside China. Anti-aircraft fire surrounds the Sabers.
He was so low, he'd blowing dust off of the runway. He must have called ahead and said, shoot these guys off of my tail. My wingman's name was Joe Logan. Then he said, hey, Lee, they're shooting us. Well, they certainly were. And the guns were shooting from everywhere, and black explosions all around us. But it didn't concern me enough to turn him loose, I'll guarantee. I was behind him, and that's where I was going to stay, and I did.
Risner can't drop low enough for a clean shot. The MiG runs out of options, pulls up sharply into a climbing turn.
When he ran out of runway and he pulled up, I was able to get an angle off, which I needed. I hit him heavy.
The MiG's wing is shredded by the Saber's guns. His only chance for survival is to land immediately, forcing or spiking the jet onto the ground, and hope for the best. Risner has another idea.
He never put his gear down. He made a 180-degree turn, and when he was headed back down, it looked like he was going to land beside the runway, not on the runway, in the grass. Well, I poured all my ammunition into him at that time. Every .50 caliber I had was chattering. He never completely leveled off.
The MiG slams into the ground and explodes. Hot shards of burning metal and debris slice through a line of parked MiGs. Risner's wingman exults at the fiery spectacle.
And old Joe Logan was so enthusiastic, he said, hey, Lee, you just destroyed their Air Force. What a wonderful sight.
The whole engagement has lasted some 5 minutes. The MiG is destroyed, but the mission is far from over. The Sabres must run a gauntlet of deadly radar-controlled anti-aircraft artillery to get across the Yalu and back to home base. Throughout the war, crossing into Chinese airspace was officially forbidden, except in cases of hot pursuit. But aggressive flight leaders routinely violated orders so they could engage the MiGs on their own turf. Cruising for MiGs in Manchuria was conducted within a conspiracy of silence. Flight leaders chose wingmen who would play along and keep quiet. Squadron commanders didn't discuss it, and many rolls of incriminating gun camera film mysteriously disappeared. Leaving a trail of flaming MiG wreckage in their wake, Risner and his wingman turned south, out of China.
Joe Logan got hit in the belly with anti-aircraft fire. He started losing fuel, and I ran over and got under him to check him out. Well, it was evident he was not going to make it because he was really pumping that fuel overboard.
The jets are over hostile terrain. The closest rescue point is Chodo Island, 100 miles to the south. It's too far away. Risner is going to do something unprecedented.
I had him throttle back gradually and let the nose down. And I don't know where I got the wild idea. Nobody had done it before. What I did was I hooked my nose in his tailpipe.
In a display of superb airmanship, for over half an hour, Risner repeatedly nudges his wingman's lifeless jet over the sea. With rescue planes in sight, Logan tells Risner he'll see him back at Kimpo. Then he ejects.
Now, Joe landed in the water. The choppers and the amphibians were having an argument who got to rescue him. Well, the choppers finally won by saying, it's my turn. You got the last one.
The helicopter attempts to use its rotor wash to fill Logan's parachute and blow him to shore. The young pilot is ensnared in his parachute lines.
Some of the ripcords tangled around Joe's neck, and he drowned. So after all that effort, we lost Joe Logan.
There is a war to be fought. 2 days later, Robbie Risner scores another kill in MiG Alley. He'll leave Korea with a total of 8 MiGs to his credit. Robbie Risner will return to combat in Southeast Asia during the Vietnam War, flying F-105 Thunder Chiefs into the heavily defended north. In September 1965, he is shot down and sent to the infamous Hanoi Hilton. 7 years later, Risner will emerge, battered, but with spirit unbroken. It is the same flight suit attitude that led him to vanquish his enemies 20 years earlier in MiG Alley.